Hi, this is Cora Stack here. I've been asked to examine this issue because I've been looking at it for many years. So, the title of this video is called The Hidden Culture of Workplace Bullying and Why Accountability Matters. Now, as I say, a number of people have asked me to have a look at this. I've been talking about it for a long time, and looking at various papers and stuff and written a good bit about it. But have you ever worked with someone who seemed impressive to senior leadership, confident, persuasive, highly capable, but to people working with them, they were undermining, controlling, or people underneath them, they were controlling or quietly intimidating? If that sounds familiar, you are not alone. Many experts now believe there is a widespread and often unrecognised problem of workplace bullying and in particular psychological coercion in modern organisations, and this psychological coercion is not recognised in formal procedures, as I understand it. I've written a paper about that. It's a blind spot in employment. How to deal with it is another matter, but the recognition of it, I think, is very important, and there's a blind spot there. So, in my opinion, and in some cases, the behaviour may be linked to deeper personality patterns that researchers are beginning to understand more clearly. Workplace bullying is often misunderstood. Many people imagine it as obvious aggression, shouting, anger, or open hostility. But in reality, much workplace bullying today is subtle and psychological, and there's a lot of patterns of passive aggression involved in it as well. And a lot of people, it can appear through behaviours as belittling others, undermining colleagues, putting people down. I mean, it all can be very hidden behind a person's back, but it's hostility, it's kind of hidden hostility, withholding information, gaslighting, isolating individuals from teams, and creating uncertainty about job security. I mean, these are just a small number of what are called microaggressions that can happen here. Each behaviour on its own may appear insignificant or small, but when repeated over time, these behaviours can create a workplace environment that is deeply distressing and destabilising for the target. It's widespread. Really, there's a huge problem. So the pattern of coercive control, when these behaviours occur repeatedly and systematically, they can form a pattern known as coercive control. Now, a lot of people still don't know what coercive control means. Most people associate coercive control with personal relationships, and many people don't even understand what coercive control is, particularly if it's psychological. They don't understand the patterns of coercive control. They would only understand physical or other kind of that sort of abuse. But similar dynamics can also appear in workplaces, especially in organisations with strong hierarchies, which seems to be more and more a part of the design of institutions, these established hierarchies, which is very problematic, I think, for this sort of behaviour developing perhaps. Workplace coercive control may involve patterns such as undermining someone's professional credibility, controlling access to information or opportunities or job promotions, isolating individuals from colleagues, creating confusion and instability. That's often workplace gaslighting, repeatedly diminishing or belittling others. Over time, these behaviours can erode confidence and make it very difficult for individuals to challenge the situation safely. This is often what happens to whistleblowers. The psychology behind some workplace bullies, inverted commas. Researchers studying organisational behaviour have identified personality patterns that sometimes appear in workplace leadership. There's a very good work done by Dr. Phil on this. He's excellent on this, in fill in the blanks. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant podcast here based on all of this stuff. Psychologists often describe certain traits as part of the dark triad: narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy. More recent research has expanded this idea to include sadism, and that's called the dark tetrad. And I often wonder, should we include those of us in the female, those of us who call ourselves female, should we include misogyny? And that would be a five-dimensional model. In organisational settings, individuals displaying these traits may appear confident, persuasive, decisive, ambitious. Who wouldn't want someone like that as a leader? In any kind of, they're very, they give that impression, very confident, very persuasive, very decisive, very ambitious, go-getters, great achievers, high achievers. These qualities are often rewarded in competitive environments. But these same individuals sometimes can show patterns such as manipulation, and these are much more hidden, reduced empathy, domination of others, strategic intimidation, and they're much more hidden than the other ones. In some research literature, some individuals are sometimes described as corporate narcissistic psychopaths. But this does not mean that every manager fits this description, certainly not. However, in some cases, individuals with these traits can rise within organisations while unfortunately simultaneously engaging in patterns of psychological domination. And it seems to me that organisational structures, via their hierarchical nature, can bring out these traits, in people as they go up the ladder. As they go up the ladder, they can, reinforce or reward these traits, and so they become more and more part of that person's personality style as they move up the ladder. That's the other unfortunate side of it. So the two-sided reputation, one of the most confusing aspects of these personalities, that they often maintain two different reputations. You often hear of this term, the Jekyll and Hyde persona, but let's put it to senior leadership. They may appear competent, charismatic, productive, highly capable. At meetings, they come across very impressive, and they can be very highly capable, get things done, and very collegiate, and they can appear, like butter wouldn't melt in their mouths. Those sort of persons. But towards colleagues or subordinates, particularly subordinates, they may behave very differently. This dual presentation allows the individual to maintain credibility while the harm occurring beneath the surface remains largely invisible, except to targets. The growing culture problem. Some researchers now suggest that certain workplace cultures may unintentionally, I think this is a huge part of it myself, that workplace cultures may unintentionally reward these personality traits. Organisations often promote individuals, and I think this may have happened to Steve Jobs. There's a lot of talk about, but I think perhaps this may have happened to him. It had a very unfortunate, ending in a sense. But there was things he did that were absolutely terrible. I thought, I haven't been able to buy anything belonging to Apple as a result of how he treated workers. But it was such a talented individual. Organisations often promote individuals who appear confident, decisive, results-driven and persuasive. That would fit the Steve Jobs personality style perfectly. Perfectly. However, these same qualities can sometimes mask deeper behavioural patterns. When this happens repeatedly, organisations can develop what some experts describe as a culture where bullying or domination becomes normalised or overlooked. This is one reason why many people now believe there may be a growing but largely unrecognised problem of workplace bullying in modern institutions. It's a huge area for research, workplace bullying, the increased prevalence of workplace bullying and what to do about it. But recognition is key here. But also, what are the solutions? How do you reduce it? And what's happened that it's become more prevalent in the workplace, and how can that be addressed? It's jumping up and down and talking about a problem is one thing, but finding workable solutions is another thing altogether. So the gap in workplace procedures. Another important issue here is that most workplace, as far as I know from my research, for bullying and harassment, there are almost no procedures that specifically even mention the word workplace coercive control. Coercive control is not usually a single incident, it's a pattern of behaviours over time. Because complaint systems often focus on the individual incidents, these patterns can remain invisible within formal workplace procedures. Let's now look at the role of HR. Many employees assume that HR, when you go into you go in the hope that HR will mediate any issues between staff and leadership. That's what their role is. That's on paper. So many employees assume that HR departments exist primarily to resolve workplace conflicts, but the reality is much more complex. HR departments are typically structured more and more to protect the organisation itself, and I don't think that's in the interest of the organisation, but that seems to be the way it has been going over the years, including managing legal risk and organisational stability, but particularly managing legal risk. Because of this, many employees now perceive HR as too closely or over closely aligned with leadership rather than functioning as it should be as an independent mechanism for addressing workplace power dynamics. This does not mean that all HR professionals lack good intentions. There are certainly some very good HR, but this would be the perception of a lot of employees. Often the difficulty is structural rather than personal, but it highlights the need for greater oversight and transparency when dealing with workplace bullying or workplace coercive control. The human cost, the consequences of workplace bullying and coercive control can be extremely serious and well documented. People experiencing these dynamics often report chronic stress, anxiety, loss of confidence and self-esteem, career disruption, and in particular severe psychological harm. Many talented employees leave organisations simply because the environment becomes unsustainable and, nothing is done about it. That's the worst of it. You'll see swathes of people leaving and no action is taken as to why all these excellent, talented people are leaving. So let's look at what could be done here. I think the first step is recognition. Once organisations understand how workplace bullying and coercive control and manipulative leadership patterns operate, they may begin to respond effectively. I mean, I think there isn't enough recognition of this type of leadership and these type of patterns. There's not enough discussion about this at all, in organisational, at the organisational leadership level. And accountability, in my opinion, is the key. The most effective way to reduce these behaviours is accountability. I mean, we you have all these performance reviews and everything else like this, but how many of them are 50-50? How many of them are, the manager reviews the staff member, but the staff member should be allowed to review the manager? I mean, it should be 50-50 for full accountability right across the organisation, in my opinion. This means recognising patterns of behaviour. I mean, we rarely see this happening. So you have the idea that the manager can, sit down and talk to the employee, but there are very few organisations which allow the employee discuss the behaviours or the abilities of the manager. And I mean, there's probably going to be bias both ways, and that has to be taken into account, but there should be a 50-50, I think, opportunity for both sides to evaluate the other, taking into account that bias will probably happen both ways, unfortunately. I don't know how you'd reduce that, but maybe that's one way of having accountability, having it a 50-50. So this means recognising patterns of behaviour over time, encouraging open communication, and in particular, I think, more collaboration, not just within particular hierarchies, but between hierarchies. I think that's extremely important. It appears to be a pattern that's followed in Denmark, collaboration between hierarchies. The CEO will sit beside in the coffee room or the staff room, he'll sit beside, the porter or any of the workers. I mean, you don't see that here anymore. It used to be the case, but it's less and less. You wouldn't see the CEO sitting beside, the cleaning lady, whereas it was very, very common. And in Denmark, apparently, it happens all the time. So they don't have the same issues, as I understand it, because of this more collaborative approach to this collaboration culture. Protecting individuals who raise concerns, that's very much part of whistleblowing as well. Ensuring that leadership positions come with responsibility. Accountability does not mean expecting perfection, or it shouldn't, from leadership. Everybody makes mistakes, and that has to be taken into account as well. But power must always be exercised ethically. Cultural change. Healthy organisations, I think, should encourage collaboration. And I don't mean that just among the circles. Somebody said this is all about circles of hierarchy, and that each circle kind of has its own, talking shop, and then it doesn't talk to this. I mean, that to me is a broken system. So what you need is collaboration between all the hierarchies, and that to be embedded in part of the organisation, and to be, valued or evaluated. And if that's, if you're looking at how an organisation works, the collaboration between all the layers of the hierarchy should be a part of what's measured as a properly functioning organisation. I don't think there's enough of that in the evaluation of proper organisations. Transparency, respectful leadership, and respectful both sides, respect and dignity to the leadership and from leadership to the staff, and psychological safety. When employees can raise concerns without fear, harmful dynamics become much harder to sustain. So I hope this has helped some people that are enduring horrendous distress as a result of workplace bullying. Workplace bullying, coercive control, and manipulative leaderships are not simply personal problems, they are institutional challenges. But they are challenges that can be addressed. But recognition is the first step at the highest level. Accountability is the path forward, and healthier workplaces benefit everyone. If this topic resonates with you, consider sharing this video, because raising awareness is how change begins. Thank you.